Hi, I'm Bhattacharya. Thank you for having me here, Adam. I appreciate it. I'm a professor in the medical school at Stanford and a COVID dissident.
Yes. That's actually how I think, like, how a lot of people found out about you as a COVID dissident, which sounds weird to even say. I would more so say as someone who is grounded in reality and is critical, which made you a dissident between 2020 and 2022, especially. But what were you going to say?
Yeah, I mean, that was the striking thing. I was just doing what I normally do, at least at the start of the pandemic, which was, what I do for a living is I research and I teach. And I was researching how widespread the disease was. I was, and it was really, really strange, the reaction of my colleagues, of the population at large. Before the pandemic, I would publish papers, and people in the field heard of me, but I never really sought the public limelight.
Right. Actually, I wanted to ask you, and by the way, go ahead, eat. We got some good sushi.
I really do.
What was the reaction from your students?
For the most part, during the pandemic, before the pandemic, I had a lot of undergraduate students, and I had a few graduate students. My own students were fine for the most part. I was a little careful in taking on new students because the reaction to me in the academic community was such that, it's very easy for students to get tagged by controversy that their advisors are doing. I didn't want to hurt their career. So the most part, I've stayed away from taking on new grad students during the pandemic, just to spare them controversy.
Are you tenured?
I am, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I've been at Stanford for 37 years now. It's been a long time.
Yeah, I would imagine you're tenured at that point.
Well, it's just, it actually meant a little something during the pandemic. Before the pandemic, I thought, what does it matter if you? All tenured means was that when the decision to tenure you comes up, do they fire you or not?
Right.
And they decide not to fire me, so that's enough. I learned during the pandemic it actually held. I was at certain times, quite afraid I would lose my job for speaking up during the pandemic. But Stanford managed to honor its commitment to tenure.
Is that possible to fire a tenured professor?
It's possible, but I would have to do something, really wrong.
Like illegal or highly immoral, like something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I know of tenured faculty that lost their jobs for various reasons during the pandemic. There's this man named Aaron Cariotti, who was a tenured professor at UC Irvine. He's a bioethicist, psychiatrist, and for his opposition to the COVID the COVID vaccine mandate, he got let go.
Was it from a sense that they were trying to make him get the vaccine, or he was just speaking out about it?
I mean, he was a bioethicist. He helped actually set the policy for prioritization of the vaccines for UC Irvine, and but he himself, I think he'd already had COVID or something, and he realized that there wasn't much benefit to taking the vaccine for someone like that.
Right.
And he very much opposed, as a bioethical thing, for people being forced to take a procedure they didn't want.
Right.
And for him, as a bioethicist, you have to act out you have to do the things you say. You can't just say something and not do it, right? So for him, it was like, okay, my principal stance is I'm not going to take this vaccine, even though I can take it and they would leave me alone. And they had a mandate and they fired him.
Wow. I think there's so many lessons that I learned from the pandemic. I am not a psychologist or anything like that, but I'm very much so interested in human behavior and the psychology of people and what makes them respond and how they react to things. But there's always something about, in a case of an emergency, a case of high pressure, I feel like that's the moment you see what people really are like. And COVID showed me that. Like I talked about before, that friend that I used to have, underneath that, the whole thing with me questioning, like, what's the importance of 6 feet? Underneath that was extreme pressure that she was facing. And that pressure was built upon fear. And I know this and I understand this about her. But it still doesn't change the fact that she was rude and disrespectful and so on. But when put under that pressure, she folded and she became what is actually inside of her. For me, that pressure, which there are aspects of the pandemic that put me under pressure, and I didn't fold. And I stayed grounded in how pandemic or not, I wouldn't do these things. And I think it's wrong to do these particular things, whether it is some emergency or a non-emergency. And that shift was just interesting to me psychologically. The people who responded to fear and the people who didn't respond to fear, the people who stayed rational and the people who have a tendency to lean into the irrational. And then on top of that, the people who were controlling the fear leading to the irrational behavior and the smearing of the people who refused to be irrational. I think that all of that from a psychological lens was fascinating, scary, and it may be a warning for possibly something else that could come down the line if we don't learn the lessons of COVID.
I mean, I agree with most of that. I mean, especially the last part. I think we have to learn the lessons. Mm-hmm. On the personal relationships, and I mean, to me, it's a question, right? So, who are we, mm-hmm. right? Are we the people that act out when we're faced with stress? We act in ways that are not our. Is it truly revealing who we are, or are we just acting under stress? And you know what I mean? I don't necessarily hold someone who's acting out of stress and think, okay, that's exactly who they are, that they finally reveal themselves.
Well, I would say this, and I could be harsh in that assessment, admittingly. But I think from a tyrant standpoint,
yeah,
there are people who are scared and wanted to wear a mask. And I know a lot of people who like to make fun of that. I really don't, because I feel bad for them.
Yeah.
Because they're stuck in that fear loop. Even to this day, they still wear that mask. You know, I got on an airplane. There's still 1 or 2 holdouts of that mask that believes it's doing something. And I feel bad for them. I don't mock them. I don't think that's right. But there are people who had a tendency to be tyrants and had a tendency to cheer for tyranny. And that's the part that I'm like, oh my God, a little bit of a tyrant is in a lot of people. Yeah. And you give them that moment, that little leverage of power, like those videos that you would see go viral of someone chasing another person, saying your mask isn't on your face. That is a bit of tyranny that exists within that person. It's not just fear, right? And it may not even for that person, it may not even be fear. Because if they were fearful, they would stay away from that person, right? Yeah. But they're going towards them and getting in their face and yelling and screaming and spitting on them as they're smearing them in public. That is a particular type of tyrant that exists within our society. And that's the part that scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, so many of my colleagues acted in ways that I've known many of them, some of them for decades, and they acted in ways that just I don't recognize them.
Sure.
But you know, I don't know. Okay, so I'm a Christian, and one of the tenets of Christianity is this idea that we are all sinful.
Yes.
I guess I shouldn't be surprised when people act in ways that are out of alignment. You know, and the question is that who they truly are, or is it a perversion of who they are? Mm. And I want to be forgiving. I want to try to be as kind as especially to regular people. I mean, because I think a lot of them were just victims, actually. I think a lot of them, they can't, I mean, they're not trained to read the scientific literature necessarily. They're respected figures at the top of public health that are telling them, treat your neighbor as a biohazard.
Right.
And I mean, in effect, right, that's be scared, fear-mongering. I mean, before the pandemic, I would have thought that public health has this ethical obligation to be a calming influence, because fear leads people to do things that are outside of themselves, that are quite destructive. Fear leads you to stop thinking, really.
Right.
And so for them, I don't blame regular people. Who I blame is the public health authorities.
Yeah.
The people who should have known. But I blame my class, like the scientists. Like, we should have acted like scientists, like public health professionals, not like the tyrants we turned out to be.
I hear exactly what you're saying. I want to be forgiving too, and you're right. I was very critical, and especially like in my writings, very critical of the people in power who were manipulating, especially people who were enacting edicts that they weren't even abiding by themselves. That was the most frustrating part. Gavin Newsome famously going to the restaurant as he's telling people they can't leave their house.
Not just any restaurant, French Laundry. It's like the most fancy restaurant in California.
Also, wasn't he there with health officials?
California Medical Association. I mean, you can't make it up, actually, Adam. You really can't.
That's where. That was like that's like the spit in the face moment.
Yeah.
It's one thing for, I don't know, de Blasio to go for a jog while he tells people they can't even go outside, right? But that's just him. But he actually got the medical association to come out, no mask, enjoy your meal at the fancy, like you said, the most fanciest restaurant in California. It's just,
It's just too perfect, right?
It's too perfect.
I mean, I think, I had like two reactions to this, like two opposite reactions. One is exactly the reaction you had, which is like, what is this hypocrisy, right? These guys are essentially told everyone to treat each other as biohazards. This is this is a deadly disease. We have to be, we're responsible for making sure it doesn't spread. Let's essentially put our lives on hold, put our kids' lives on hold. Don't go visit with your parent. You're in your nursing home. Let them be lonely. They told us all of this, right? You can't even go visit with a relative that's in a hospital.
Right.
No, that's not allowed. But then they're acting like as if they have this privilege above and beyond us.
Yes.
As if they're above us, right? And that hypocrisy just reeks. That's one reaction I have. But the other reaction, I mean, I have to say, not so much Gavin Newsome, but like a lot of them were doing human things. Like there's this woman, Deborah Birx, who's the White House COVID task force coordinator.
Right.
Like during the Trump administration. And she was very much one of these. You have to lock down. You have to stay apart, 6 feet apart. You have to wear a mask. You have to we're all in this together. And during Thanksgiving of 2020, she had, after telling the country essentially don't have Thanksgiving dinner, it's too dangerous. She went and had Thanksgiving dinner with her older parents. And when asked about it, she said, "Well, they were lonely."
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, my reaction was like, that's a human. That I can understand that, right? I don't want my mom to be lonely. I want to take. There's a completely understandable thing.
Right.
And the question is, why didn't they have that same understanding for the rest of us?
I think one of the biggest disconnects that I've, especially in the past 3 years, that I've realized, there's a disconnect between class groups. The people who are saying, you can work from home. And I'm like, most people can't, right? Just get a laptop and work from home. And they can't fathom that there are people who are unable to. while at the same time, they're going to the grocery store and someone's serving them. They're ordering DoorDash and someone's bringing them that food. They can't DoorDash on a laptop, right? So someone is doing something. They're ordering from Amazon. Where do you think these things are being packaged? How do you think it's being delivered to you? There's a whole mechanism that's in place. And they can't grasp that understanding that someone else is not in the privileged position, and it is a privilege to work from home.
Absolutely is.
But someone else isn't always in that position to do so. That was the kind of disconnect where I started realizing that a lot of people have a really hard time, and it may be part of human nature.
No, but I think our society is deeply unequal, right? And it's unequal in exactly that way. I mean, many ways, but it's exactly that way for sure. I mean, I call it a laptop class, right? And a lot of the laptop class, they really don't understand the vast network of people that allows that kind of lifestyle to exist. They have no idea about really in any fundamental. I mean, they may have some. They may know the person who delivers their groceries to them during the pandemic. They understand that. Mm-hmm. But someone has to grow the food. Someone there's no. You have to keep the electricity running. You have to the Amazon package. Someone has to go and to put it, make sure it goes in the right place. I mean, there's just a vast network of people, and I didn't even scratch the surface of them. Mm-hmm. That allows that kind of, and it's maybe I've seen estimates something like 20 or 30% of the American population that have got jobs like that. And of course, the United States is very privileged compared to the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. Much of the rest of the world, like you go to a poor country like India, it's 5%. Mm-hmm. If that, I'm not sure. I'm seeing a rigorous estimate, but it's a very small fraction of the population. And yet, we designed a policy that has said, stay home, stay safe, keep your kids out of school. They just have them do Zoom.
Right.
I saw some estimates out of Uganda. 15 million kids did not go to school. Not Zoom school, nothing, Adam, nothing, zero school for 2 years. We robbed a generation of those of poor kids in poor countries, and this is even more heartbreaking. 4.5 million of those kids never came back to school in Uganda. 4.5 million. And it turns out, according to this UN report I read, that it was a lot of those kids were sold into sexual slavery, child labor. And you ask, how could that happen? Why would you, you and I are both parents, you would never imagine doing that, right?
Right.
It's because they were at risk of starving. They were such economically dire straits that the choice was do this terrible thing to their kid or have their kid die of starvation.
Right.
Right? Can you imagine? I mean, and the idea that these lockdowns are like a virtuous thing, and you hear these stories, you see what the actual reality of what it did to people, the most vulnerable, the poorest of the world. It's almost unimaginable. Because I can't fathom how a lot of people who they study the social determinants of disease, they study inequality, and yet they stayed silent.
Right.
How did they not see immediately? First time I heard of a lockdown, among my first thoughts was, okay, every single poor person in the world is going to be harmed by this. Mm. And I think that actually happened.
You're absolutely right. I just think about how I feel like the past few years we've failed kids. Mm. I think we failed kids tremendously. My son suffered during COVID. He was about to enter high school, and his experience entering high school is basically this chaotic confusion of what's schooling, right? Losing his motivation. He loves to learn. He likes being in school, but no one knew what they were doing. And then on top of that, you had the teachers who didn't want to come back to school, and they had the teachers union fighting for them, not the kids. Right? And they knew that remote work was a failure. To do it on that type of scale was an absolute failure. It's one thing to go to it maybe for a month or two, but they were damn near trying to make a permanent policy.
Yeah.
And I think it showed us when, like you said, when the pressure is there, when that moment is there, the people who were sacrificed were children and the poor.
Yeah.
And they just said, F them, the adults are going to do what they want to do,
Yeah.
and the wealthiest people get to decide that they get to stay at home and keep making their income, and maybe some of the poor people can serve me.
I mean, I don't have an argument with you. That's exactly what happened, Adam. That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've been through the whole pandemic. I've been decrying this. I remember I wrote a op-ed in like July 2020, and I tried to get published in the United States, but I couldn't. But it ended up getting published in this Canadian newspaper.
Canadian,
yeah,
that surprises me. I thought you were going to say British.
We had some, I don't know how we managed it. Canada was really, really locked down. But there's this one, I think it was a Financial Post. They published it. And I wrote it with a former student of mine who's now an econ professor in Canada. So
I gotcha.
Anyways, it basically made this argument. It's like, look, and in fact, the first draft of it was that we ended with, we're harming the poor, we're harming children. Surely we can't keep going with this policy. We are a moral people. And you know what? I don't think we're moral people. I don't think we're a moral people. Not after what we've been through.
I think that when we are, what's the best way of putting this? I think when our no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm kind of full. I think when an individual has their necessities met, they're more likely to be charitable, right? That's what I kind of feel like. But when those necessities aren't being met, they lean a little bit different. And I kind of felt like usually that rule, it works. But like we just said, the people who were fine were like, well, F these people anyways.
It was a virtue.
Right.
That they're rich enough that they have a job that can be replaced with online. That was somehow that made them virtuous. That's what public health told the world. And they used this. This was an Orwellian thing. You remember essential and non-essential?
Yes, that bugged the shit out of me.
It bugged me too. The first time I heard it, I was like, oh my God. And the funny thing is, if you're essential, that meant you could be sacrificed. You go out, you go keep society going, you go keep civilization going. You risk, even if you're like 64 years old and 65 years old and you're in the workforce, you're essential, you go take the risk of COVID. And if you're not essential, then you're privileged enough to stay home and stay safe.
Right.
This is like this Orwellian flip. And did you know society was divided into essential and non-essential?
No idea.
This is the first time I heard it, and I've been in public health for a good long time. I'd never heard the idea of essential, non-essential. And
it was like like you said, it wasn't language that existed before. I've never heard that determination. I mean, to everybody, their job is essential.
Yeah.
I have to take care of my family, I have to pay the rent, pay the mortgage. The sacrificing of businesses. Yeah. Right? They had the PPP loans, which ended up being scammed to all hell. And
I mean, that's in a rich country like the U.S. We spent $6 trillion to soften the economic dislocation we caused by the lockdowns. And It was already really bad. People lost their small businesses. People lost their livelihoods. They got fired or let go at scale. Especially poor families suffered in the United States. But okay, let's take India. All right. So India, they have this March 2020 lockdown. The prime minister puts his lockdown in place without any warning, and he orders every migrant laborer in every big city of India to go back to their home village. Sometimes it's like 1,000 miles away. They don't have the transport, and there's a 500 million people, 1/2 billion people living in these big cities. Many of them are living, hand to mouth, meaning I got coconuts. I sell the coconuts to I'm in Mumbai. I sell the coconuts to the IT workers on the street. With the money, I buy coconuts for the next day and food for my family.
Right.
So the lockdown happens, no one to buy the coconuts go bad. I've lost my life savings that day. And then I have to go back to my home village, which is 150 miles away. 1,000 people died en route that day, in that single day, based on that one order.
Wow.
The heartlessness of it is just incalculable.
Now, we were talking about forgiveness.
Yeah. We were, actually, weren't we?
And my worry is something like that, right? And this is actually the first time I'm even hearing about that. So thank you for telling me that. I imagine in poorer countries that the scale of torment that people went through because of lockdowns, like we have no idea, right? The numbers that we might have may actually be undercutting it, for all we know. But I just wonder, what's to keep it from happening again? And I know that there's a push by certain people. We were talking about Scott Galloway, talking about Bill Maher, asking for forgiveness and grace. But as I was saying, forgiveness is something that I choose to have, because forgiveness is for me. You know, like when you would hear about one person murdered another person, and you hear the family member says, I forgive them, right? They forgive them because they don't want to hold on to that anger and that animosity. And that is something that they are choosing to do for themselves, right? They're not doing it under some sort of pressure. That's not how forgiveness works, right? And it doesn't mean that you forget either. You're just saying, I'm letting go that negative energy, that resentment, so I can move forward in life, right? But that is a personal thing. When he's saying we need to have forgiveness, it is almost a demand that you must now do. So he just got done, if you really think about this, he just got done talking about how he advocated for forcing people to do things against their will and allowing the government to do it. Now I'm going to basically advocate for forcing you to forgive us, to force you to do something that is actually supposed to be voluntary. I'm going to advocate that you do it in a mandatory way, to suit my guilt, right? My foolishness. In the piece that I wrote about for New York Post, which I'm hoping it comes out tonight, I start off by saying, if there's one word that describes what happened during the COVID lockdowns, the word is drunk. Drunk. I said these people were drunk on power.
Drunk with power, yeah. And
they consumed it endlessly. And then what happens? They want us to forget that binge that they just went on, even though they threw up all over our civil liberties.
Yeah.
Right?
That's interesting word. That's a great word, actually.
Thank you. And that's what it feels like. And I was making a comparison to someone who's an alcoholic, really, right? Where I said we need to have an intervention, right? Where the regular people who were screwed over, and I even talked about an institution saying to my wife, you either get it or you lose your job. And she waited to the last day because they said, we're serious. We'll fire you tomorrow if you do not get it today. And for her to choose, not even choose, because there's a lot of people who say, oh, they made a choice. No.
No, that was coercion.
This is coercion.
Obviously, right?
This is obviously coercion.
Right.
She was coerced to do this.
Yeah.
And she was forced to have that shot in her arm if she wanted to keep her job. Mind you, throughout the entire pandemic, she worked. So apparently she wasn't a threat until the magical vaccine appeared. Then all of a sudden she's a threat.
She probably already had COVID before, if she worked all the time.
Oh,
well,
I'm trying to think.
She did, but
I think she had it.
I mean, a lot of the non-essential, a lot of the essential class, the frontline workers, they had COVID, and they're as a result, the marginal benefit of taking the vaccine is very likely lower, right?
Right.
Because that means you have some immunity. lowers the risk of.
What's immunity? What's that? I've never heard that word before. Immunity.
Exactly. It's like a magical thing. We've forgotten 2,500 years ago, the Greeks, during the plague of Athens, they would take people who'd already had it and have them take care of the people that were sick.
Right.
Because they understood immunity. We foolishly forgot I guess, I learned about it in medical school, I promised you. Okay, so a couple of things. You asked about reform. I think that's really the only way it never happens again. Mm-hmm. Right? There has to be a public acknowledgement and then fundamental reform of our public health agencies that did this. There's a few things I think that are key here. Like one is that you had a concentration of power in a relatively small number of hands. Mm-hmm. And tremendous hubris. That's the word I use. I like drunk because drunk is interesting. Yeah. It's tremendous hubris, like this overweening pride. Like, you have Tony Fauci saying, you remember this? Like, if you question me, you're not simply questioning a man, you're questioning science itself. Who says that, Adam? I mean, think about that.
An arch villain says that. I am science.
I have the science. So there's that. And then so there's like concentration of power, hubris, and then there's like, sort of on top of that you have this like greed and money interests that like glom onto this that take advantage of it. So and a lot of our federal agencies that are supposed to protect us against that, in fact, cooperated with that. Right. Right. I mean, FDA looked to me like it was if it were an arm of pharma. Basically. Yeah. I mean That's basically how they were treating it. So I think for me, like that reform has to be these are fundamentally political problems: concentration of power, sort of regulatory capture of agencies, things like that, abuse of power by science bureaucrats, basically. Mm-hmm. And that's going to take a political response. So I've been looking at like the political candidates that are running and trying to evaluate are they going to take that impetus, that need for reform seriously or not. And you have a range, both people like Ron DeSantis and RFK Jr., who are, to me, seem like they want to take that very, very seriously. They took to heart some of the lessons we learned and want reform. Right. And then you have, on the other hand, you have other politicians who were like, "Oh, was there a problem? I didn't realize there was a problem."
I was on my laptop. I thought everything was fine.
So I think that needs a political move, right? And I love your description of forgiveness. So on the personal level, I mean, I've had people betray me. Adam. I mean, like at one point during the pandemic, 100 of my colleagues at Stanford wrote a secret petition, circulated. The chair of epidemiology circulated and some of my friends signed it, essentially asking the president of the university to censor me because I had been on this podcast. So it was this policy roundtable with Governor DeSantis, when I said that there wasn't any good evidence that masking children did anything. Right. Which is true. There's no good evidence that masking children does anything. Right? Children, right? So I mean, and some of my friends signed it. And so, like, I've had all these opportunities to learn to forgive, and to me, it's a spiritual discipline. Like you have to, and it's an act of sacrifice. I'm giving up the desire for vengeance, the desire to get even, and it's exactly as you say. The advantage is, I don't need it any. I don't like that. I can't. They've harmed me once. I won't let them harm me a second time internally by desire to have something. I mean, it's helped me be at peace. Right. When my friends have betrayed me, but I can't. They can't force it from me, Adam. It has to come because I want it. I desire it. It has to be a sacrifice that I make. Mm-hmm. I love how you said that. That's exactly right. At least that's my experience. I didn't really have much experience of it before I never felt betrayed before the pandemic. Yeah. But I do think that for so many people I think they were even the people that were acting in this sort of haughty way. I'm not talking about the leaders. I mean, I'm talking about regular people. They were the victims of this. Like they were fooled. There was a specific, like essentially public health decided to use propaganda to create fear with the idea that fear was a virtuous thing. You will then comply with our orders.
Yeah.
And people this is a very effective psychological, I mean, they use techniques that are in the psychological literature and the behavioral economics literature. And you know, they work in the literature and they work in real life, it turns out. It's just deeply unethical that they did this. Essentially, so many people were just victims.
I go back and forth because I try to see the nuance. I realized that there were segments of people, maybe on the surface level, they were doing certain things, but why were they doing it is kind of important to me as well. And were there people that were scared? Yes. Were those scared people doing things that were irrational? Yes.
Yeah.
Were they advocating for things that were wrong? Yes. But why? And I think that there was a segment that was malicious, for sure. Just like there was a segment of politicians that were malicious.
Some people really got joy out of forcing that guy to wear a mask,
Right.
forcing, that kind of thing.
I think there was a segment of, and I even saw this with the politicians, there's a segment of the politicians where it's purely political. So a perfect example was prior to the election, Trump was all about the vaccine, wanted to push it through, and we were all for it. I remember Cuomo says, I would never trust the vaccine. Kamala says, I wouldn't take the vaccine. I believe Joe Biden even said the vaccine, oh, what's that?
It's a Trump vaccine.
It's a Trump vaccine. As soon as he wins, all of a sudden everybody must get the vaccine. It's that kind of thing. It's like they think we have short-term memory, like short-term memory loss. Like you just said it like a couple months ago that you didn't even trust this thing. Now you're making everybody get it, even as far as making it part of OSHA policy and having to have, I cannot tell you, I wrote this in the article, the anxiety I had throughout the entire pandemic. I really didn't have much anxiety because I knew the truth, right? And my life was actually relatively normal for most people. Like while the highways were empty, I was going to work every day. And I didn't really have much anxiety about what was going on. And it was actually really good for my son because he was like, Dad, I need to know, like, what's going on? And I just gave him the truth.
Yeah.
Right? And not trying to make my son scared.
Yeah.
And I think that helped him. But the only time I ever had anxiety throughout this entire endeavor was listening to OSHA arguments for
The mandate.
for mandating vaccines, making businesses. Mind you, I was at a business that didn't want to do this,
Yeah.
right? But they have to comply with OSHA policy. So they're like, listen, if this happens, you either get it or you have to get to. I was like, that's insane.
So Adam, this is one of the moments I'm proud of during the pandemic. I put in an expert affidavit in that OSHA case.
Oh, wow.
Reached the Supreme Court, we won, and they got rid of that OSHA mandate.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I mean, I was absolutely shocked by that, right? So first of all, I didn't realize that OSHA had such power. It seems like
I didn't either.
Used the power, right? And so that means OSHA it's part of the federal bureaucracy, right? The president's not supposed to order them to do this. They had to internally decide they were going to abuse their power in this way.
Right.
And the arguments they made were so outside of this they wanted to ignore immunity after COVID recovery. It was just pure, straight anti-science. And they want to ignore the fact that if you get the vaccine, I mean, the argument that they made was if you have to get the vaccine or you're a danger to other people at your workplace. But the vaccine doesn't stop you from getting or spreading COVID. It was clear in the data by, when was it, August or September 2021. Mm-hmm. They created this class of outcasts, right? You were unclean if you didn't get the vaccine. That was the premise.
Yeah.
In fact, that's the whole pandemic. That's the whole ideology of the pandemic response. There's a clean class and an unclean class.
Yes.
You are, and so did you get COVID? You're unclean. What did you do wrong? What was wrong with you? How come you weren't safe enough? Being practicing safe enough?
Right.
Oh no, I had to go work. No, that's not good enough. You were being unsafe. Are you wearing a mask? That means you're clean. If you're not wearing a mask, you're unclean. Are you vaccinated? Well, you're clean. If you're not vaccinated, you're unclean. Did you get boosted? Then you're clean. Otherwise, you're unclean. This clean, unclean distinction, and it's so closely linked to social class, right? So it's like the poor are unclean effectively. It is like this close to the caste system, like in India, right? There's this like sense of like, the other person is dirty, I'm clean.
Right.
At the heart of all of these pandemic responses. And, the OSHA mandate was just terrible. Like the idea, like you're vaccinated, and if you're vaccinated, you're not a danger. Well, that's not what the science was saying. And yet they're going to tell every company more than, I forget, 100 employees to get it.
Right.
No, it's just an abuse of power.
It was absolutely abuse of power. And I felt like the testing part was, once again, coercion.
Oh, clean, unclean again.
Right.
And
prove that you're unclean.
Clean.
Yeah, prove that you're clean. You were clean yesterday, but are you clean today?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. To me, it set up one of those sly things where they pretend you are making a choice, right? We're going to bug you until you get the vaccine. That's basically what they were proposing. Get the vaccine, you're good. And if you don't, well, okay, you can get tested. But what was the frequency that they were advocating for? Like every other day?
Yeah, it was like twice a week or something.
So it was something ridiculous.
It was crazy, right?
It was so ridiculous. And
well, I mean, and you're ostracized, right? You almost have to like wear a sign.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Actually, in some places they say, okay, if you are vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask. If you're unvaccinated, you have to wear a mask. With no justification, like vaccinated people can get and spread the disease. Also, right. The masks don't stop the disease. That's another question altogether. But really, it was a visible symbol of being unclean.
Right. Right. It was another indicator, another way to subjugate people, and like I said, I had tremendous anxiety for about 24 hours, waiting. Like, I remember listening to some of the arguments while I was at work. I remember the HR lady coming in, and she didn't agree with any of this stuff either. But she was like, listen, if they do, here's the paperwork. Like, here's what we will be forced to do. We're just preparing.
And then you have to make a choice.
Right.
Do I take this thing I don't really need? And you're a young man. You'd worked the whole pandemic. I
had gotten I got COVID twice.
So you already had COVID. You have immunity.
Right.
And you're a young man, you don't really, and there's like reports of myocarditis coming out in young men taking the vaccine. And so now you have to choose. Do I take this risk for taking this thing I don't really want?
Right.
Or lose my job and I can't feed my family?
Right.
Yeah, I can see why you have anxiety. It's terrible. We shouldn't have put you in that situation.
So you bring up myocarditis, and that's like the, I'm going to, I haven't really talked too much about this, but I have talked about it. So I'll tell you this. My father-in-law got all of a sudden sick, and they took him to the hospital, find out that he had more issues than we knew, right? So it's not to say he was in perfect health. He used to, be an alcoholic, so he had issues. He had was it fibrosis or something? I might be mixing it up. Some sort of kidney issue, which, from my understanding, they say like, all right, when you have this, you may have like another 5 or so years to live, right? We didn't know about this, mind you. But here's the thing. That's not necessarily why he went to the hospital. He went to the hospital because he was breathing through his chest. Right? He couldn't breathe. So finally, my mother-in-law forced him to go. And, they're trying to treat him and trying to see what all the things that are going on. They say, you have a blood clot. And it's right by your heart. So we have to give you blood thinners. We have to fight the blood clot. But here's the problem. You have all these other issues that are going on. And so they ended up having to induce an coma. They had to kind of like, put him under. And they had to give him dialysis as well to try to fight this, right?
So his organs are shutting down. He probably has a pulmonary embolism. That's most likely, it sounds like. But.
Yeah. But here's the thing. They were saying there is a possibility that we can get this. Here's our plan of action. We're doing X, Y, and Z to do it.
Did he make it okay?
No. He got an infection. And that was it.
Oh, dear.
And they basically called us in and said, he's living on the machine right now. So made the decision, pulled the plug, he died immediately.
All his organs shut down.
Yeah, at that point. The infection killed it from there. Yeah. So he's on the dialysis, he's going through this.
Sepsis and, okay, I know
yeah.
This is...
So I bring this up because after we pulled the plug, I hear a conversation and I hear my mother-in-law say, she's having conversations with family members, and she says, oh, yeah, we got our booster a couple of weeks ago. And it was just like, bloop. I was like, what? And I didn't say anything at that moment because
there's no purpose in saying it.
There's no purpose in saying it. Yeah. But on top of that, the vaccine topic was a dispute within the family, right? And even I remember having a conversation with them. They were like, why won't you get it? It was like, the risk of myocarditis. What's that? And I had to explain, like, it just became this whole thing.
You already had COVID twice.
Exactly. So from my perspective, and I understood that there was like this wall and I can't talk about it, right? But what I did was I asked my wife, I said, just ask your mom, when did he start having issues? She said, a couple weeks ago. Can't make that connection. And I said, yes, he was not in the greatest of health. He was 72, 74, right? Not in the greatest of health. But the literature says that the risk is even greater when you get the vaccine for getting blood clots. And I'm like, this is the type of information that they're not getting, that they're not understanding. And I can't even talk about it, because I feel really bad. Granted, I'm talking about this publicly, but like, I feel really bad because I can't have the conversation with them because they're looking for why did this happen?
Yeah.
Right? And they're searching for like, what could I have done? What could we have done? And yes, he had other issues that were going on, but he would not have been in the hospital if it was not for the blood clot. He was breathing through his chest because of the blood clot. Yeah. He wasn't getting enough oxygen in. And I'm thinking to myself, if I'm going through this, how many other people are going through this? How many other family members know the truth? Right? How many doctors know the truth? But it's so polarizing to tell them the truth that yes, while this vaccine may have some benefits for certain people, there is a risk. Yeah. And that risk we're pretending does not exist at all. Yeah. And when there are people who are affected by it, now we have to act like nothing ever happened. And we talk about forgiveness and grace. What about closure?
Yeah.
They're not able to get the proper closure because they believe a lie. And that's what sits on my soul.
I mean, the thing is, Adam, is like in any particular individual case, you can't, it's really hard to tell sometimes exactly it sounds like it was very closely correlated in time.
Right.
But as you say, there might be other things. It's really hard to tell.
Right. But it's not even a consideration.
But what you said, here's the thing that I think is really important, what you said, in terms of like the policy. Mm-hmm. Everyone should be given a choice, an informed choice. Be told, here's the benefits, here's the risks. You should decide for you what's best for you. Go talk to your doctor and decide what's best for you. That's how medicine that's what I thought ethical medicine was.
Me too.
But instead it was, if you don't get this, you're unclean. If you don't get this, you lose your job. If you don't get this, there's something wrong with you. You're crazy. Right? And so there's like this coercion. And then on the other side of it is like underplaying any conversation at all about documented harms. Mm-hmm. So, how do you have informed consent when that's the case? You cannot.
You really can't.
Right? And so that's the part that I mean, there's so much sad about that story, but that from the policy point of view is a huge problem.
Yeah, yeah, it really is, and I call just a working class person, like been poor, been through all that stuff, so I get it. I've been homeless, been through all that, and so like I understand regular people, right, and I understand what's going on, and it is not to say that just because you're wealthy means you're a terrible person. No, like that's not it. For me, it's not about the money. It's about what they're doing.
It's about respect.
It's about respect.
Yeah,
it's about understanding, like for example, you might have enough money, you might have enough power, you might have access to advocate for things that you want.
Yeah.
That's great, right? You're in America, you have that money and power, you can do that, you can flex it, fine. I'm all for that. However, I have an issue when you use that money and that power and that influence to screw everybody else over. And that's the part that bothers me about the COVID situation.
I mean, like, just take the vaccine, like the coercion and the force, right? We have these rules of ethics in medicine for a reason. It's because of respect for people, right? You go to a doctor because they may have some more knowledge about the science or the medicine, and you're get their advice, and you work together essentially as a team to make a decision, so that your values come into it. At the heart of it is respect for people.
Right.
And what we did was the exact opposite. We turned medicine into this thing of force. And a thing of social shame. I can't recognize it. It doesn't look like medicine to me. It looks like something else entirely. And I've been a professor in the medical school for more than 2 decades. I don't know how to like reconcile the vision that I had, the reason I had to go into into research in medicine and all that, with what we did during the pandemic. It's just and that's why the reform to me is so important. That's why I stayed with this topic forever.
Right.
I think medicine is important. I think public health is important, but I think it has to. If it's not ethical, then it's not worth it.
Yes.
And I want to. Is it return? Maybe it wasn't. It was always thus. I don't know. But like I want that vision of public health, and ethical public health, and ethical medicine to return.
Speaking, because you mentioned medical health and the institution, I've met so many people who now don't trust it.
Yeah.
Like they used to say, if I'm going to my doctor is giving me the best information possible, right? We always said, get a second opinion, right? So that's always existed. Doctors are human beings. They can make mistakes, or they can have difference of opinions, different strategies. But we always had trust in medical institutions when it came to patient care, right? And it feels like for a lot of people, maybe not everybody, but for a lot of people, that trust has dwindled.
It's not just, it's gone.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I'll give you a number that makes this point really clear, right? So what is this? It's like November 1, 2023, right? So the last 2 months, the United States has been subject to this like propaganda campaign to take this booster, this new booster shot, right? The CDC director is like proudly saying she got it and all this stuff, right? So the thing is like 2 months into this propaganda campaign, 3% of the American population has taken it.
Right. 3%.
So if you don't have any coercion, the recommendation by public health alone only convinces 3%. There's something that is I've never seen in my career anything close to that kind of distrust. I mean that's distrust you play out with your actions, not just with words.
Right.
It's not just a survey where you say, oh yeah, sure, I trust public health. What you're doing is you're saying, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to listen, even though they're telling me to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's hard to take. I mean, I don't see how you get back to that without fundamental reform. How you solve that without fundamental reform. Some act of humility on the part. Like if I were CDC director, I would apologize to the American people.
I think that it sounds weird. And by the way, I'm usually not one for like forced apologies. You must apologize. I think it is something that needs to be genuinely done by the actors who were part of it. We sincerely apologize, and here's what we're going to do so this doesn't happen again. I don't want a forced apology. I don't want a coerced apology. I don't want any of that. We are sorry, we were wrong. Here's what we're going to do so it doesn't happen again. And to get these people, like you said, hubris, right?
Yeah.
They barely acknowledge that it didn't work. You heard Fauci say, that's not exactly what I said. And it's like, roll back the tape.
Yeah, Gavin Newsome. Oh, I didn't shut the schools. It was the local school districts that did. I mean, like they're not interested in that.
Right.
I've given up hope on that, Adam.
Yeah.
I don't think that's happening. I don't think that's happening from the people that made these decisions. They're too proud of and for them, it's like, they're the smart people. They're the powerful people. To countenance the idea that they could have been so wrong and it was so damaging, it's too much to take for them.
Yeah, I'm not holding out either. It's just
but I don't think we need them to do it. Mm-hmm. I think because a lot of the thing is that they held positions of power, right? A president of the United States can apologize for bad actions by the American government, even though that president wasn't the person that made those decisions.
True.
Because he owes the office, right? The head of the CDC can apologize for the crimes of public health. Crimes is the wrong word, but maybe it's I don't know if it's the right word or not. But yeah, they can apologize for the failings of public health, even though they may not be responsible because they hold the office. I mean, we've seen this lots of times, and I don't know how effective it is, but I think it's necessary. Like, I'm sure you've heard of like the Tuskegee experiment, where African American men were experimented on for decades, untreated syphilis. It was just a huge, catastrophic, unethical behavior, with the result that many African American men are just deeply distrust public health,
right,
and scientific experimentation on people. Right, that's completely understandable, and you can have a CDC director or a president apologize for that, even though they weren't the ones doing it. I think that's the key thing to me, is like you have to, whoever is going to take on that mantle of power, even if they're not the ones directly responsible, I think now have an obligation to try to make amends and make good.
Right. I actually wrote an article for Epic Times, and granted, it is a very fantasy concept. But I wrote it...
Dare to dream, my friend.
I wrote it amongst this constant word that kept coming up. And I said, we need COVID reparations. And my argument was like, they talk about slavery and all this stuff. We probably do need something like that. We need a sit down and an acknowledgement that we did wrong by the American people. The people whose businesses shut down, we will compensate you for our actions as the American government for forcing your businesses shut down unnecessarily. We were wrong about this. It won't not happen again. And here's what we're going to do. Yeah. It is the full reparations package that is complete fantasy because it'll never happen.
I think, I don't know if you get reparations, but what you could get is thoroughgoing reform. That is feasible. In fact, not just feasible, it needs to happen. Like, it desperately needs to happen, right? You need to put in checks and balances. So one man, for instance, is not the head of this powerful federal agency that doles out cash to every single biomedical scientist of note for 40 years almost, right? That's too long. That's too much power in the hands of one person, right? We have real basic ethical check and balance of public health decision making. So they can't make unethical decisions where they treat people as if they're just, things to play with, like Sims models or something, rather than humans. I think like that, the kinds of reforms that we're talking about, that's feasible. That's why I say political action.
Right.
Like you got to have. I mean, it's going to take political action to do this. It's not going to. Then it's not going to happen. It's not Tony Fauci's not going to make this happen, right? Mandy Cohen is the head of the CDC now. She's not going to make it happen. It's going to take political action and overturning of the leadership before you have that kind of reform and that kind of the thing that you're looking for. I mean, I've thought of like truth and reconciliation commissions, like in South, like South Africa had after apartheid, or like after In India, there's this Gandhi wins he overthrows the British government with this idea of satyagraha, this like non-violent sacrificial sacrifice. And at the end of it is like he's calling for peace, right? He's not calling rather than, and whereas like all these people want retribution.
Right.
I think we need reform. I don't know that we need retribution, reparations, maybe. I like, it's funny. I put on Twitter I thought I was being cheeky, but I think I really didn't. I really didn't mean it. Like I kept saying, when the vaccine mandates were happening, I kept saying, the bosses rehire the people that you fired, and bring them back with back pay. Give them an apology. I think something like that would be like a. I mean, I don't know if you. I don't know. You're right. It's a fantasy, but, like I said, but it should happen, right?
It should happen.
Yeah.
I think it is the right thing to do from a actual justice standpoint. Like if
these people were actually harmed.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. If I'm a prosecutor and I wrongly lock up the person, you cannot be surprised when they sue and they win a lawsuit and we pay them as a sign of saying we were wrong, right? Or at least the justice system is having actual justice for that person who was wrongly convicted.
Yeah.
But there is nothing for that when it comes to COVID. It's like, well, like Scott Galloway says, we were just caught up in the moment and this was the information that we had, which is, by the way, that's a lie. Like, because
I ran a study in April of 2020 measuring how many people had already had COVID in Northern California and then also in LA. And it was like, 4% of the population, 3% of the population. That doesn't sound like a lot, but it was actually, after 2 weeks of lockdown, and supposedly the virus has only been in the country for like a month and some, 2 months and some, I guess. It was a lot. 4% meant the death rate was in the community was something like 0.2%, 2 out of 1,000, not like 3 or 4 out of 100, like they were saying.
Right.
And people, actually, I talked about anxiety. That led to like hit pieces against my family. The university went after me. There were all these people. I published 60 papers in my peer reviewed papers, and they're people saying I don't know how to do the basic math. They just didn't want to believe the result.
Right.
So, and that's really the fundamental thing. All these people that were making these decisions, they convinced themselves that it was, a world-ending event had arrived. And they knew they had the wisdom of what to do, which is lock down, stay home, stay safe. A very, very classist thing, but that's and for them, they were not open to new information. Right. They were not open to science. It wasn't regular science. Like in science, you normally have people criticizing. It's part of how science works. Like if I'm a scientist, I'm making mistakes. That's just what we do.
Right.
Luckily, we have a system to help correct each other. But that's not what they were. They were not correctable at that point.
So I want to tell you a theory that I have, because you were saying probably at that point it was probably in the country for a month or two. I actually think that it might have been in the country much longer than that.
September 2019. That's my date.
That's your date?
Yeah.
I was going to say sometime in fall 2019.
You could convince me October.
Yeah.
You could convince me August, but you're not going to convince me much later than that.
And the whole thing is that I think it was something that we have travel between countries all the time. So if we know that it was breaking out in China, let's just say, right? It was breaking out in China. Why would you think that it didn't go anywhere else all of a sudden for 4 months?
We're a globalized economy.
Right. Right. We have ships that come in from China. We have people who fly in from China. We have people who fly in from other countries who were just in China to come to the United States.
The official patient zero in China is December 30th, 2019,
right?
Supposedly. And then all of a sudden, within a month, it's found in Iran, it's found in Italy, it's found in late January 2019 2020 is the official start date in the U.S. Less than a month, right? No, it was already seeded all over the world. Right. And let me give you one piece of it. Let me tell you why I think September. I probably should justify September. The argument there are these studies of blood banks where they take stored blood. You donate blood. Sometimes they store the blood. And they did antibody tests on the stored blood from September 2019 in northern Italy and Angola. And I think even in the United States, some stored blood bank from like October or November 2019. And it's positive antibodies for this virus. It was in, that's the only way you get it. So many countries all at once seeing it. It was already spread to some degree. And there's all these stories about people like, oh yeah, I had this terrible thing in November 2019, right around Thanksgiving. It was awful. Thought I was going to, cough my lung out. That kind of thing.
Yeah, to me that makes so much more sense.
Well, that's the only way you get 4% prevalence in early April 2020.
Right.
It doesn't spread to 4% of the population in from January as the start date to early April 2020 is like basically 2 months later during a lockdown. The only way you get to 4% is if it's already there.
See, now here's my thing is the start date, like you said, September, the start date matters, right? Because if it's been existing, let's say 4 or 5 months, that means that we've been living perfectly normal lives for 4 or 5 months.
I mean, to be fair, like it is a disease that does a lot of damage to older people, right?
Yes.
Absolutely, especially older people with chronic conditions and things. So, what that means is there's probably an uptick into deaths for older people that we didn't even know.
Right.
Like and we attribute it to the flu or something because there was no test. But we don't. But I take your point. You're absolutely right. We didn't panic.
Right.
There's no panic going on.
We have, see, from my perspective, even when I didn't know, like September, and I was thinking like, oh man, it's like just getting over it. In the very beginning, like just like everybody was trying to figure things out. But I remember when it was in China, we were talking about it. I remember my wife and I, we went to Paris, and I said, yeah, there's some weird thing that's going on in China, right? So I remember December specifically that it was going on in China. Then shortly after that, I remember it was in Italy, right? And I remember them saying that it is specifically really bad for older people, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, well...
Excuse me.
No problem.
I got down the wrong pipe.
Clean, unclean. But I just remember specifically thinking, it seems very evident based off of Italy, right? Because Italy already started like trying to battle it and talk about it and things like that, that it is specifically negative for the older population. And Italy has one of the most older population countries in Europe, or maybe even in the world. So yes, it's particularly bad in an older population like Italy. But we're not in that case, but at least we know that who it targets, so we can try to mitigate it for older people. Like, what can we do?
So this is when did you think of this?
I was thinking about that right around the lockdowns.
Okay, that is the Great Barrington Declaration, which we wrote in October 2020. That's your idea. Well, your idea is the Great Barrington Declaration. And the funny thing is, like that Great Barrington Declaration, which I wrote with in October with Sunetra Gupta and Martin Kulldorff. It's the least original thing I've ever written in my entire life. I mean, that's the standard way we've dealt with every single respiratory virus pandemic for a century, and it worked. It worked in 2009 with the swine flu. It worked in 2003 with SARS. It worked in 1976 with the H1N1 flu. It worked over and over and over again. We identify vulnerable people. Use whatever countermeasures we have to protect them, but do not panic the rest of the population. Do not disrupt the lives of the rest of the population, because if you do, you're going to end up hurting their health, and you're going to hurt society's capacity to deal with these problems much worse than the disease itself.
Right, exactly. We're nearing the end, but I just want to, I try to ask everybody this question. Are you optimistic about the future?
I am, but I'm naturally optimistic. My friends tell me I'm too optimistic. I think we've learned some very hard lessons, and of course there are, as we've said, there are people that don't want to have learned these lessons, but they're too obvious. Too many people have been hurt. Too many people have seen the absolute failure of this very pretentious, I am the science crowd. And as a result, there's an impetus, a desire for reform at the population at large, even if they don't know to say it yet, even though they may be mixed up in like politics or whatever, but it's really there. And there's no way, I think, ultimately for it not to play itself out in a positive way. Like it's going to play itself out with fundamental reforms to our scientific establishments, to our public health establishments, to our medical establishments. That'll lead to a lot of good, I think. Yeah. But we still have a few steps before we get there.
I agree with you, and I'm an optimist.
I know you are, Adam.
I'm optimistic for multiple reasons. One, we're having this conversation. I'm actually optimistic I think COVID lockdowns in the situation could have actually been worse. And I think it was a way to see how humans react. And I think with failure comes a way to learn from it. I failed plenty of times and I've learned from it. And I think COVID doesn't have to be the thing that we have resentment over. Like right now we can talk about it because it just, we say ended, but it just became like kind of a consensus, like it's over, right? Even though Joe Biden said COVID is over, it was over before he said that. But we can talk about it now. So now that we can talk about it, we can actually have discourse about it. We can dissect it. We can have some truth actually finally be heard, rather than in the moment because of politics, because of an election that's going on and all this other noise. We can finally get down to the truth of the matter and examine it and try our best to not have it happen again. Because like you said, there was swine flu, there was all these other things, Zika virus, all these other things that people were worried about virus-wise. And do we want to do that again? How we responded to COVID. And I tend to believe that even the people who were maybe at the time COVIDians, I think many of them woke up at some point.
Yeah.
For whatever reason.
All the movements in our direction.
Yes. Everything is in our direction. So the next thing that comes through, there will be a much stronger pushback to say, we did this before, we will not do it again.
I mean, you and I are talking, we wouldn't have met but for COVID. And there are some blessings that came out of this.
Exactly.
And now we're friends. So yes. I think you're absolutely right. I think that there's now a coalition of people we've learned our lessons, and whereas a lot of people come to me and tell me that they would see me on TV or whatever, and they say like until they heard me, they felt like they were all alone or crazy or something in 2020. That won't happen next time. We have a huge group of people who have learned these lessons, and we won't be alone. No one will be alone in this again. Like we'll have is political the right word? Like we're just a community, really. Right. That of people who understand the trick, the power plays that were used, the clean and the ridiculous clean and unclean, and we won't let it happen again.
I'm optimistic, and I'm glad to hear you actually say that. Someone who's on the front lines of this narrative. And learning about your involvement in OSHA, I actually didn't know that. So thank you so much for that. You cleared my anxiety. The only anxiety I had in the 2 years. You cleared that for me. So I really do appreciate it.
I mean, I had to, I mean, I actually at some point I just had to decide I was going to, I knew a lot of my colleagues were going to be giving me all kinds of grief, secret petitions or whatnot. But you have to decide, right, at some point, like what's your career, what's your life for?
Right.
And I've had an absolute privilege to have had this position and a research career centered around, health policy, infectious disease policy. So I don't know if I don't speak up, I thought, who's going to do it?
And one last thing I'll say is, that's why I'm sitting here doing this, because I had a career doing IT work, but I felt like I had to say something, right? And I felt like no one was saying what I wanted said, right? There were certain people I agreed with but they weren't saying it wasn't my words, it wasn't my voice, it wasn't my temperament.
I mean, you have a story, a very compelling story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do something, right? Especially during COVID and watching the riots and all this other stuff. It was crazy stuff going on in 2020. I felt like it would be negligent of me to not do something. And I felt like I was capable of doing it. And I say that I think part of that was God. I felt touched to be able to do it. I don't think that was all me who wrote that book.
Oh, Adam, that's exactly what not that book, not your book, but I felt that. I felt like, I mean, you have to decide what your life is for. Is it for yourself or is it for others? Are you living it? Are you willing to sacrifice yourself so that others may benefit? I mean, that's really, if you want a purpose, that's it. There's nothing more.
And I'm sure you thought about your children.
Now I met your son. You can see how proud he is of you.
Yeah, and I dedicated my book to him and everything. And I also thought about, like, what if things get so crazy and they look back and say, why didn't you do something about it, right? I could have tried and it failed, but at least I tried, right? And I think there is something inspirational about what you did, and I hope I'm inspiring people to come out of your shell. Like, I'm sort of an introvert kind of person, but I've had to learn to do extrovert things. So I've had to do this because I think it is necessary to do this. I truly believe in what I'm trying to do, and I believe you believe what you're trying to do. And at some point, you made a conscious decision that this is the right thing to do. And I know that there's going to be arrows coming my direction, but you did it anyways. And I think because you're a man of faith, you believe that ultimately it will come out in your favor.
I mean, I think we have to, we're put here for a purpose. That's what I believe. I fundamentally believe that. And that purpose isn't self-gratification. It's not elevating my ego. And often it calls for sacrifice.
Yes.
And in my case, you talked about anxiety. I only had anxiety once during the pandemic also. And that was when I was under attack in April, May, June 2020. Like, there were hit pieces on my wife. I felt like I couldn't protect my family. And they're like impugning me with like ridiculous motives, like I'm doing this for money. I've taken $0, right, for all my pandemic work. It just feels wrong to take money off of the back of people during a pandemic, deadly pandemic.
Right.
So it was just this like injustice, and I felt this anxiety that was like building up, like my entire career was about to go away. I'll tell you, the moment that I've been at peace, like I decided, I think it was like July 2020, that if my career goes away, if my reputation goes away, if I don't care. I need to stand up now. I have to say what I believe, what I'm seeing, and whatever comes, it's God's will. I'll accept it. I'll tell you, Adam, it was peace. I mean, it was like this anxiety was lifted and gone. I spent a month. I lost 30 pounds in a month, Adam, from like anxiety. I couldn't sleep. I forget to eat, and it was really strange. I'm usually a very laid back person, and I just, I never thought I'd go do something like that. But it was when I decided that I was just going to let whatever God's will was there, and if I have to go through giving up all the things I thought I valued to have that, then it was worth it. Yeah,
absolutely. And last thing I'll say, you had a supportive wife next to you.
Absolutely did.
And my wife was my editor, right? I would write something, send to her as she's on the train going to work, and she would read it and she'd be like, wow, this is great. And I tell her all the time, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing, even with me, switching into this career in a more full-time role. I had to have the support of her to do this. So I think life is about timing, right? There's certain things that happen, and sometimes out of the ashes, people are born from it. And I think that's how I feel. I think you were born out of 2020 to do something greater than you've ever had to do, to sacrifice yourself for the greater good, like the actual greater good.
I mean, and when you make that decision, I'll just tell you, I didn't think of it as like I'm going to succeed in it. I just felt like I had to do it.
You just had to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I've learned that the striving for success is the wrong way to approach it. You're striving for the purpose.
Yeah, there's an integrity to yourself. Like there's a purpose you were put here for. There's a reason for the actions you take, and and if it's only for yourself, then it's not in alignment. You're not going to do well.
Right.
It has to be for other people, and then you have to be willing to give yourself up for other people.
Right. Exactly.
And the people, and for most people and many people, it's your family, it's your children. Of course, that's exactly what you're for. That's what that's the purpose is, right? As a dad, you know that firsthand. But like sometimes it's for more, and you just don't know what that more is, but it's there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I even to this day, people are like, "What do you what's your?" I'm like, I have no idea. But whatever is coming in my direction, that's what I'm doing. I never thought I would be doing something like this. So we'll end it there because we could talk for like 4 or 5 hours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you for dinner. This is really fun.
Yes. I didn't even say we're sitting in London after the art conference, which I think it could be the beginning of something great for the world. I'm starting to buy into that. It took me a few days, but I'm starting to buy into that. But thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure you'll see me in California.
Looking forward to that.
Thank you,
my friend.
My pleasure.